Welcome. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest today, Dr. Korrie Allen. She is someone that I consider to be a friend. She is a colleague. She is also a licensed clinical psychologist and the program director of training at Birch Psychology, where she works with kids, teens, adults, and the families and systems that support them. Before earning her doctorate from St. John's University, she studied psychology at the University of Notre Dame, where she was also a Division I athlete. She competed in softball as a catcher. That experience gave her firsthand insight into the pressures, resilience, and personal growth that sports can bring, shaping much of the work she does today. Over her career, Dr. Allen has led clinics at the University of Denver, served as an associate professor of pediatrics at Eastern Virginia Medical School, and worked on staff at Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters. She's trained extensively in parent-child interaction therapy, school neuropsychology, and autism assessment, and she specializes in helping people better understand themselves, overcome challenges, and connect with the right supports. She's also a researcher and a national presenter whose work has been funded by the U.S. Department of Education and other major agencies. Korrie is also a sports mom of two, and she brings both professional expertise and a deep understanding of human behavior to every conversation, including this one. It was an honor to spend time with her, and I know that there'll be more conversations that will bring her into. We didn't get to all the things that we wanted to today, and what we did cover resonated so deeply with me, and I know that it's a conversation that I'm going to return to over and over again. So, all right, buckle up and get ready. Here is Dr. Korrie Allen. So excited to have you here. I don't often call you Dr. Korrie Allen, but that is appropriate for this conversation. So excited to have you here, Korrie. Thank you for taking the
So
time.
excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. And there's so much. We were talking ahead of hitting record that this conversation may need a pin in it to have a part two. So stay tuned for that. So let's jump in to
hmm
your background, your cultural upbringing and background, and how that has
Sure.
shaped who you've become.
Absolutely. It was a little bit unique. I kind of grew up in a family in the 80s and 90s where sports wasn't just an activity, it was kind of the culture that we lived in. My dad played college football. My mom's father had qualified for the Olympics in cycling the year it was boycotted. And as kids, my siblings and I were sort of always involved in some kind of sports, and we all ended up playing a college sport. My brothers were football, my sister and I played softball. But ultimately, kind of what we learned really young was that dedication, commitment, sacrifice, and hard work from a young age. Like our vacations were
Mhm.
very rare unless we were kind of going to visit family because our lives sort
That's
of
true.
revolved around
Yeah.
training and competition. And it really shaped how I saw the world. I do believe that kind of that consistent effort and discipline created other opportunities for me. You know, being able to play in college and go to college, my parents wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise.
Mhm.
And ultimately, kind of those habits that I formed in playing sports translated to every area of my life.
So
Um,
real.
yeah, and really being comfortable with maybe missing things. And I even remember when I'd meet people and they'd say, like, "Oh, have you been to this place?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, we had a tournament there." And they're like, "No, no, no, like, have you gone there?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean, just gone
Just
there?"
that's so that's I can there's so much about that resonates, and I can relate to that. And I now, like, fast forwarding as a mom, look forward to these adventures to these places to go like take these trips to explore new spaces. So I want to rewind. I caught something that I didn't know about you and your family with the boycott of the 80 games. Like, that's what I when I was in high school, I did my like big English paper for my AP English class on that experience. How, like, if you feel comfortable sharing, how is that talked about? That, like, I can only imagine, right? Like the
Yeah.
dedication, sacrifice, hard work, and then that all, we don't need to get into the politics of it, but just the impact of that, and then the message that you carried or took away from that as a young person.
Yeah, I think the interesting part was it was just such a different time and mentality. And so like even with training, it what he trained, but then he still like worked. Like
Mhm.
he and so it was kind of like there was this training and he had done all this and he had a lot of obviously natural skills, but then he just was like, okay. And it was upsetting, but he like, he believed in the government, he believed in what was going on, and
Hmm.
he just sort of like rolled with it. And it was like, well, I guess I'm not going to get to do that. And then just moved on and had a career. And so it wasn't, whereas now I feel like, oh my gosh, that would be
Yeah.
so devastating if that were to happen.
Mm.
But I think in a funny way, and I know we're going to talk a lot about this, like with balance,
Yeah.
is there was more balance then on some
Mhm.
level. Like the training was rigorous. I don't want to ever undercut what he did, but at the
Right.
same time, there was more balance. Like you didn't, it didn't subsume his entire life. Whereas
Hmm.
now, if I'm sure he would never even come close to qualifying based on those times that he had there. But I think the interesting part is that now we're kind of trying to manage as, professionals and as parents, this world where training can become all,
Hmm. The
consuming.
singular focus. Totally.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. That
Yep. And
makes,
from a
yeah.
very young age, like
Mhm.
so young now that sometimes, it's an elementary school where they're kind of like, okay, you got to figure out what you want to do. And I'm like,
Yeah.
they're 8.
That okay, we're gonna get there. So I don't want to jump over your experience as an athlete because it matters, right? It's shaped who you become and your experiences, and it also gets pulled into how you see the world today before we go into your professional expertise. But that like is definitely something I want to make sure that we hit on, whether it's today or in part two of that, like the singular focus, age appropriate, just developmental milestones that we don't necessarily know as parents
Yep.
and
Yep.
aren't trained to know. So yeah, so we'll hold that. I've got that on my paper and come back to your experience when it was, this so softball was your sport that you played in college. What position? I
Yes.
know I've asked you and I
I was
forget.
catcher, but
Catcher. That's
even
right.
before that, like we still played, even two sports. Like I played basketball and softball. And then my
Right.
junior year, right when you're starting to get more heavily recruited, I
Mhm.
just did softball, but it wasn't as uncommon there. Whereas now I can't even fathom, someone really doing multiple sports like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so I feel like it was sort of right at that tail end where you could kind of do more than just one.
Yep.
But sort of those, playing a sport created that structure of my childhood in a way. Like
Mhm.
it gave me not only the sport, but my community, my purpose, this constant set of goals to work towards.
Mhm.
Um, and you learn how to deal with disappointment, how to work as part of a
Yeah.
team, how to take personal responsibility, which I didn't understand a lot of that till I started to work, until I was in grad school. And I was like,
Mhm.
why are people getting upset about this? Let's just get it all together and work and have fun, and there's like, but I want to do it this way. And I was like, what's happening?
That's
And
so it's so true. It's so true. So like the skill building that's happening through this vehicle of sport, like the awareness and like naming what actually is
hmm
happening isn't right. That's same for me going through this process later and learning how we learn and right how we build culture. It's like, oh, that's what was going on. Oh, I get
yeah,
that. These are the skills
yeah.
that we're honing. And so it took you so that was that hard to give up basketball or by that point did you know softball was the sport for you?
Oh, I absolutely liked basketball better. Just
Oh my
as
gosh,
better at
that's how
softball.
I felt about soccer.
Yeah.
Oh, and I just worked with a soccer team recently, and I was like, "Just letting you know, it's my soul sport." And they're like, "Why'd you
Yeah.
swim?" I'm like, "I was a lot better at swimming,
Yeah.
and I had more control." Well, we don't need to get into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So what
I
was
was
the
five
driver? What was your
four.
why?
I was
Yeah.
I was small, and yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we were living in California at the time, and basketball was really good there. And you just kind of knew like, okay, I'm not even going to have a chance to play this in college. And sort of my dad told us when we were young, like, well, you can go wherever you want to do, make your dreams big. But if you're outside the state school, you're gonna have to figure out how to compensate for that.
Okay.
And I don't know why. It was funny, because my daughter was just saying, "How did you know Notre Dame?" And I said, "I don't
Yeah.
know. It's like I just decided this in 8th grade, and that was it. That was like my sole focus." Which actually didn't. Yeah, I really loved it. We had gone by there, and one of our cross country moves, and that was sort of, yeah, but I
Love it.
decided.
I
Yeah.
know, and our paths almost crossed. I looked there, right? I wanted to go to school there. There's just things, right? Like as you're going through the recruiting process, that wasn't complete alignment, but so much of that school. Yeah. Would you say from that experience and competing in college and at that level, some of the things looking back, you're like, yes, like I take this away from that experience of what you learned.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, just because when you go from that high
Mhm.
school level to college, as it's, such a level above, it's really humbling.
Mm.
And so you can go in, being all state, all everything, and then you get there and you really have to build confidence, have good
Mhm.
problem solving, good emotional regulation, but then also really have to learn kind of at a young age how to deal with pressure. And the
Yeah.
reality is, like, if you don't do good, you're not gonna play. And
Mhm.
that is, um, the reality of what we're dealing with at that level. But
Mhm.
I think it was so powerful because you learned how to cope with that very young. So then as I've
Yeah.
transitioned throughout my career, I feel very comfortable in high pressure
Mhm.
situations,
It's
which
right, so
almost
there
better when there's a lot of pressure versus
yeah.
like when it's slow, it's like almost anxiety provoking.
It's so that is something Gervais speaks to, is, like, there's people that
Hmm.
are wired in 2 different so it sounds like we have a similar piece there, like, the brighter the lights, the greater the pressure, the more
Yep.
yeah, so similarly, and whereas others and it's not good or bad or right or wrong, others tend to do better performance-wise when they pull the pressure down, and, like, it's just an
Yeah.
everyday thing. I've done this, 100,000 times before. So what would you say so that preparation for that, you start talking about building that when you're younger and kind of navigating frustration, or some of the things that your parents did that helped to cultivate that inside of you?
I think it's really funny you're asking this because um my brothers and my sister and I were just talking about that we never felt competitive with each other.
Mm,
And a lot of just in my professional world, I deal with a lot of families where the siblings are extremely competitive with each other. And so our parents were extremely young. My dad was playing
mm,
football and had me as a 19-year-old, and they went through college with
yeah.
myself and then my sister. And so I said, "Do you think they were deliberate?" And I think what they did that cultivated this was they never put parameters around us. So it was like, "Hey, I want to go be on this team." And they're like, "Okay, let's make it work. You might have to get this
Yeah.
carpool, or you might have to do this. Or I don't, I'm struggling in this area." And I can vividly remember being at the batting cages at like 10 p.m. with my dad. He was like, "Well, let's figure it out." And so I think
Mm,
one of the things they really did was they never put a parameter on it, but then they
mm,
also tried to have us create an identity that wasn't just around our performance in the sport. So
mhm.
my dad was always like that, how well you do is really important, but how hard did you work? What was your preparation? What was your goal? Let's go back and figure out where there may have been a pitfall. And then they emphasized school and other stuff. So we had these other identities that I
Yeah.
think helped um helped us really develop in a way that it didn't become such a singular focus and so emotional when it didn't go accordingly.
It's that's so beautiful. Yeah, I'm just taking that all
Mhm.
in because that's that's what I'm seeing too, right? When you help build
Mhm.
that, like not when it's not a singular focus, and also there's dimensions to you. There's like these
Yes.
spokes of you. And the other thing I heard that's so beautiful in there is this permission slip of dream, and then almost like a let's figure it out. So
Yes.
now when it's not going the exact way, or we kind of bump up against a challenge or a roadblock, it's not this crisis moment where we're at the end or we run away with story. It's like, huh, let's figure it
Mhm.
out. Yeah, that's
Right.
so there's so many
Yes.
there's so much to that that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah,
Yeah, it is interesting. And it's funny because as kids, we obviously didn't understand that. We were just,
totally.
and I can vividly remember, being on teams and people like, "Oh, you can't do that," or you can't. And I'm like, "What do you mean you can't do that? Of course you can do that. Like, why would you not do that?" And I think one of the things they taught us very young was like, you can do it and it's going to be hard, but that's okay. And
Yeah,
here's your plan for that. Like,
right,
and creating a timeline with it. Like, just because you want it, it's not going to come tomorrow.
right. Oh,
And
that
I
delayed
think,
gratification is real. Yes. And
mhm.
so I'm going to tangent us again a little bit
That's
because
okay.
of where this conversation is going. In a conversation with a former client, she's now a high performance consultant and just an incredible human being. She was world champion in rowing, sculling,
Oh,
rowed on
wow.
the national team for years. And so we were talking about this conversation that she was listening to on another podcast, and they were, and you hear it everywhere around if, parents who want support their kids' dreams. And then there's people that show up to the conversation like, well, only zero point 0.1 or whatever percent make it. And only, my kid's never going to be an Olympian. And like they shut these doors before they've even explored that option. So kind of we were climbing into this space and we were both getting very fired up because we said, imagine if our, like, I can't even imagine if my parents had slammed that door shut. And so post that conversation, we were continuing to just like feel into why we were both being really activated by this and what do we think was going on. And here's what we came up with. I love your take. Is that
Yeah.
it's like what are we trying to protect when we show up that way and we're quick to dismiss our kids' dreams? What are we trying to protect them from feeling disappointment if they don't get there? And then
Mm-hmm.
she's like, right. So if you are asking a kindergartner, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. You're not like, well, the statistics of you actually going and the amount
Right.
of money that you would invest if you went to law school. And like, no one's doing that. So what has happened? Like, we're just like totally raw and not all the way thought through, but it's something that's been, yeah, like I've been reacting to that kind of response from parents when they show up in that way, slamming the
Yeah.
door shut and dismissing. Because I was a kid that no one knew when I was 9 or 10 or 11, even 15. And
Right.
so if
Right.
that had been the response, so yeah, love your take on that
It's
because
so
I
interesting.
I hear in the way your parents showed out for you that permission slip of let's just see. Nope,
Yeah.
no guarantees, but why not dream? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a few layers on that one. I think the first layer is like, even as a sporting parent, being a parent of someone in sport has been a little bit of a mirror for me. It showed me where my competitiveness comes out, where I might
Yeah.
over identify like with my child's journey and where I need to step back. So I think as a parent, sometimes if someone had a difficult experience, there's this like, but I don't want them to go through that,
Yeah.
where rather than really like, yeah, it taught me patience, it taught me humility, and a reminder that, the goal is to really raise healthy kids who are willing to try things and take risks. I think it's really hard for our children now, though, because
Mm.
everything they do is so public. So
Yeah.
even like if they we were just talking about how I would say dumb things when I
Yeah.
was a child. Like I said dumb things, but it
Oh,
wasn't on video and no
yeah.
one recorded it and no one wrote a message about it. And I didn't
Mhm.
and when I said it, I just said it. It wasn't on text. And so I think for some people there's also that fear of like if it's not perfect, then we can't
Yeah.
handle it. Um and it's even hard just thinking about like with hockey and every game they have, like the amount
Yeah.
that is published. You're like, who is keeping all this data
Yeah.
and why is it here in 24 hours? Like,
It's
and
real.
it
Yeah.
is. And so I
Mhm.
feel like what we've done has been polarized. We're either like, don't take the risk, or we become completely, people tend to become so
Yes.
obsessive, and then that's when you're like, hold on, they're
Yeah.
in third grade, the likelihood, that's in my head, I'm like,
Yes.
can we just play and not pretend like we're going to all be professional athletes and have fun? And why are you guys getting competitive about our fourth graders? Like, this should be
Yeah.
fun for them. So I feel like what it's done is push people to
Mhm.
either really avoid sports or lean almost like too much too early, rather than
Mhm.
being like, this is a physical activity, it's after sports, it's giving them a group to play with. And so we've kind of missed some of that. Whereas
Yeah.
you could try soccer, and if you weren't great, no one really cared.
Mhm.
It was still fun for you. Like you had a
Yeah.
good time.
And I didn't have to commit to the whole entire year. I think this is like it's a like my 9-year-old. Like we're going
Mm-hmm.
through this. She wants to try gymnastics and she wants to play soccer and she wants to do hockey. So we've like, okay, this like gymnastics isn't this like and we've just have to explore other places. We're still new. But,
Yep.
like, locked in, like, this is it, this and I'm like,
Yes.
"She's 9, please." Like,
Yes.
she's really good at this. She loves to do it. It lights her up, but, like, it doesn't need to be all that right now. And it's
Yes.
okay if that's their thing and they aren't wanting to do others, but I just feel like s the natural kind of next step there is like, okay, like, like, we can't because it is almost forcing our hand as parents, like, you're all in or you don't. So we've found a middle ground for now, but I don't know how long that will keep her. Like,
That's
she's doing this,
great
like,
though.
in-house 1 day a week. But that yes, what you're speaking to, the polarization, that's part of the catalyst for me starting this podcast, honestly, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not that we're, like, all psycho crazy, like there's behaviors that could kind of fall underneath this
Yeah.
just definitely not aligned behavior where we get, like you said, that word over identified. And maybe we break that down for people that aren't familiar with what that means. And then this like drop off and just not doing it or like slamming doors shut in that camp of like it doesn't
Yep.
like my kid will never make it, so why bother
Yep.
almost. Yeah. And
Yep.
so what does this place in the middle look like? How do we is it possible given the cultural bath that we're swimming in?
I know.
What
I
do you
know.
think?
It's
I
I think
believe it
I
is.
will
That's why I'm here,
I do.
right? Like, yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
And I think like we just need to step back a little bit. But I agree with you. Like there's this thing I can vividly remember with Charlie, like he was 9 years old and he wanted to do he was doing baseball and they had this all-star team and it was the same as swim. And I said, oh, we're just gonna skip, we're not gonna do the all-star team. And multiple parents were like, well, you're gonna ruin his baseball career. And I'm like, wait, he's 9. Like we don't have like he's gonna do this other thing he really wants to do too, and then we'll come back to baseball next spring. But there is this kind of like all or nothing so young, which is really hard. And I think the other thing that happens, which is hard for me as a clinical psychologist, is that so many of them drop off at 13 or 14 when they
Yeah.
desperately need to be doing
Mm.
something else. And like every time I hear of a middle school that's like cut their team or a high school,
Mm.
I'm always like, oh, because it's this chance for them. Again, like I said, not only did the sports give me opportunities as an athlete, but it created a group of friends and a constant,
Mhm.
um, people that I was with in a community. And that's the part where I feel like is so sad, right? When kids are looking at what is trying to figure out autonomy and identity, we're sort of
Mhm.
removing these outlets that used to be, were designed to be, physical activity and fun and creating like, well, you have to be on the travel team by you're 13. There's no real need
Yeah.
for this rec league.
Yeah.
Um, and so I really want us to go back because
To
I
the
think we need to
rec
get to,
league,
yeah,
that
like get
model.
to the
Yeah.
root of
Yeah.
like, you can have tears. And I know, we talk a lot about that, like the difference
Mhm.
between even like, um, being elite versus, being high performing and all those.
Mhm.
And I think that makes sense when they're in high school and they really want to go that way. And some kids show a lot of aptitude very young and
Yeah.
that can be fostered. But I think we can't just be either or. Like it's not you
Yeah.
don't do it or you're that 1%.
Mhm. It's yes. Yes. So when that let's lean toward the over-identification. Will you explain that to somebody that doesn't to people, not to somebody? But and I also say this with such love because we swim in this language every day. Like this
Hmm.
is our world and I don't want to be using language that is just like not making sense to people who are listening and then they're feeling like well and slowing down to explain it is totally okay because it'd be
Okay.
like me dropping into a when I read my contracts and lawyer speak I'm like
Oh
I
yeah.
don't really understand what this is saying. So over identification, what does that word mean? Yeah.
I think, there's a lot of different ways that people can look at it. I think when you're really when you kind of are in your parent hat and you're thinking about it through sports, it's really almost like rating your worth on how your child is performing
Yeah.
and feeling very up and down based on that. And when I step back and I think about it, I understand like if you're doing some of these competitive sports, like you're driving, you're paying a lot of money,
Mm.
there's like this piece of you that's like, they should be the best.
Yeah.
And so you feel like a real sense of your worth is based on their performance. And that is a dangerous place to be, not only personally, but as a parent for that child.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think sometimes, even when you've been an athlete, it's almost like you overfeel what you think they're going to feel based on something. And
Yeah,
sometimes they
I'm
are, as I
nodding
said.
along. It's resonating. Yeah, no, that's it. That's it's so then the question's like, okay, how do we see that? First step's awareness, right? Like being able to actually acknowledge it, know that you're not alone, right? Like
Yeah.
we're sitting here saying like also, right? Like pieces of this we've had to work at. And like then what? So like what how do we unhook from that, right?
Yeah.
And maybe
I,
keep unhooking because it's probably not a
yes.
one and done. Yeah.
No, I think it's something that you have to be, especially when you have a child that is in a competitive sport that is like, let's be honest, it takes a lot of your family time.
Mhm.
It's a resource that you're
Mhm.
utilizing to help support them. But I think I always have to step back and be like, what is my purpose in this? Like my ultimate goal as a parent is to raise a healthy, balanced adult
Mhm.
who not just a great athlete. And so I think when we can step back and say that we need to be, being a parent of an athlete teaches you patience, it teaches you a lot of humility.
Mhm.
because we know
It's real.
they're going to make mistakes.
Mhm.
But I think it's also stepping back and thinking like, why are we doing this,
Mm.
and what is the goal, and really recognizing like it is to be a great athlete, but also to be an independent person that knows how to work hard and have a goal and deal with disappointment and also deal with success, because that can be equally challenging for some of
Yes.
our athletes. And I think that's the first step, is really being able to separate yourself and say, okay, I'm rating my worth as a parent based on how my child just swam.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
much more to that relationship and that whole
Mm.
kind of culture of your family. But it's really easy. And a lot of times it happens before we even realize what's going on. And then we're feeling angry at them for something that you have like no control over.
Mhm.
So I'm always like, what are your controllables? I can control how I get them there, what I feed them,
Mhm.
making sure they have the environment, but I can't control the outcome of how they perform.
Mhm. It's so real. This is so important just to name because I think this is what's missed in this idea of when parents are showing up in below the line ways of just like acting out or
Mm-hmm.
I see it now. Like once I learned more about nervous system and what we're doing with 5 and 5, right? And this like
Yes.
I was able to see it more as like, oh, like dysregulation, not just this like crazy person. And then I
Yep.
see it in myself. I start to notice when I'm like, when my heart's racing or I'm gripping or my belly's tightening. And
Yep.
so that's that process of naming it and meeting ourselves with compassion. So
Yes.
important. And then figuring out what I'm needing to do to soothe in this moment because it's not even that idea of what can we control. That one is hard because you're like, really nothing right now.
Yeah, literally. Like when they're about to play or they're, on
Yeah.
the ice or in the pool
Yeah.
or on the field, like there's really nothing you can
Ah,
do. But
yeah.
they did that study where they had a couple of and I know they did it with Olympic parents and that's not always the norm, but I'm sure it applies to every parent, where they monitored their heart rate.
Heart rate during the events.
And
It's so
we
real.
can
Yeah.
all relate to that, where
Yeah.
you're just like, going up and down and all
Yeah.
over the place. And so I think exactly what you're saying is recognizing that within us and
Mhm.
trying to figure out like what is causing this for me and
Mhm.
how am I now presenting. So I always
Mhm.
make a really strong if there's a good race or a bad race, to have the same look, because the first thing
Yeah.
they're doing is looking up at you. And I
Mhm.
used to have this tendency to like want to walk away so that I wasn't like all looking upset. And I'm like, wait, whoa, what am I doing? Like, why am I upset? Like
Yeah.
I'm upset for you because I know you're going to be upset, but I need to show modulation of
Yeah.
myself.
That's
I
it.
can't expect that from you if I can't modulate my own emotional reaction to something that's upsetting.
That is so important right there. Like, can we just hang here and you teach us all right now that being able to that sturdiness is so much easier said and like I
Oh
can
yeah.
get there in my mind and also being able to do that and having strategies. So I joke, I've shared this on the podcast before. Like I'll chew gum, I have rocks.
Hmm.
My friend jokes like crystals. When I lost my mind, I shared it on the episode with her. That one that before we're recording this, it's just recently released. Where I talk about I was slamming like I just lost it. I was feeling like my brain was sensing danger everywhere. I was totally dysregulated and slammed the glass. And she's like, "You had the wrong crystals in your pocket." Like we're teasing me in that way, and also figuring out what tools can you stack. How do you do it? Do you want do you know what you
Yeah.
do to help yourself? Yeah,
And I think the
regulate.
hardest part is that, like you said, a lot of times it kind of creeps on you.
Mm,
Like you realize like, oh, this has sort of been building, or um, you know, it can happen when you've made a big change or you've done something that you feel like and you're like, oh, they're not doing like I thought they would do. And you have this
mm,
like explosive moment. And then when you unpack it, you sort of realize it's not really even about their performance. It's that I feel like I've sacrificed all this. Now, why did I do this if it
yeah.
wasn't really to provide more opportunities for them and to give them, again, back to that, what is my goal as a parent? That's what I have to constantly
Yep.
remind myself of, is like, yes, being a good athlete is one of those pieces of it, but that's just like one little ring of an entire
Hmm.
umbrella of skill set that we want to give. I think, and like you said, any rituals you can create are great,
Hmm.
whether it's chewing gum, sitting in the
Breathing.
same place,
Right.
walking. Like I
Yeah.
walk between each race because I
Yeah.
just find like that gets me a little calmer.
Well, then you
Um,
don't get stuck and freeze too, right? Like you're really
yep.
like actually walking so incredibly. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes, I find myself doing wall sits on the walls, like,
Yes.
I
Yes.
sit, like, on the and it may be sounding I don't know, it might be coming across as dramatic, and at the risk of that, I'm okay talking about it because I think that we don't talk about it enough, and similar to, like, with our young people of this, like, effortless perfection of we've gotta have it all together, it's like, no, actually, we all care deep down how our kid's
Yeah.
doing, and all of us at some point are gonna get hooked in one way or even have an off day, and so if we can talk about it and, like, have the space to actually dive in and know that we're not alone in it, then we can move toward tools with way more grace than if we're feeling like we're the only one that,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I
Or
think
that
that
you need to like perfectly handle all these different
yeah,
situations. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
but
giving and owning it and saying, "Oh, I was a little
yeah,
upset and it was
yeah,
not appropriate." But
not
it's back to that like mirroring, like we know so much of what our
mhm,
kids do is mirroring our behavior, not our words. And
yeah,
so I'm always trying to reflect like what do I actually want from my daughter or my son in in this moment? I don't want them to have a hissy fit. Like I
yeah,
want there to be some calmness to it. Or like recognizing I need to take a walk around the pool before I go and get a
mhm,
debrief. Or maybe I cool down and then I come back. Or
mhm,
if it's not, another sport where, if I get pulled, I need to take a seat before I go question what's
yeah,
happening. And so I think two things I always think of is, modulating myself and reflecting like what do I want for my child at that point, and again that mirroring piece, because
yeah.
my kids I watch all the time will do things that I do, and and I'm like, shoot, that's not what I said. I really wanna
Oh my gosh, that's so good. So,
yeah.
is that related to mirror neurons, or is it related it's just how through development, that's what their wiring is attuned to?
Yeah, I think it's a combination, and then I
Yeah.
think the other big piece is that they just model our behavior so much more than what we say.
Mm.
Even though we think what we say is, like, so
So important.
monumental, a lot of times they're not
Oh my goodness.
listening to it. Or they're mirroring something we say that we're like, "No, no, no," or repeating something that we say, maybe not mirroring's not the right word,
Right.
and you're like, "Well, that was not really what I wanted you to
Right. To hear what I said, what you heard. Yeah, yeah. Oh my
didn't
goodness.
match."
Oh, so shifting gears, so in your work, I do wanna get to this today, and then we can sit and reflect after of what else can we explore together. There's so many places. But this idea you've mentioned of that the why, like, why are we
Mhm.
doing this? What is, and when we think about this role as sport parent or parent, right? A human being guiding in the development of these young people that we've brought into this world, this idea of wanting them to be happy, wanting them to
Yes.
be right. So I hear that a ton. And I actually, so
Mhm.
this with the scale behind me, use that as a teaching tool of like, okay, well, like, yeah, so I'm gonna just drop it on your lap and have you explore this. And this
Yeah.
idea of like what you're noticing and what can we, yeah, what can we lean in and really listen to when it comes to what
Yeah.
your experience can teach us.
I mean, just stepping back, even as parents, we're so inundated with materials and websites and reels and videos of
Mhm.
the best parenting technique and do these five things and it guarantees this. And I think it's requires so much more thought and kind of sifting through information, so much more than previous generations
Yeah.
that often, whether it was good or bad, sort of relied on what they had been exposed to.
Mhm.
And I think that when I think about sports, the way I was raised was that you kind of push through and you lean into the hard parts. Like that
Mhm.
was exciting. You were gonna really work hard, and then afterwards, that felt good. Today, there's this pressure on us as parents to often make sure our kids are comfortable and happy and everything's perfectly aligned.
Yeah.
And so we really value comfort and happiness, and
Mm.
those are important. They are. I am not undercutting them at all.
Mhm.
But with that, a lot of times we avoid the frustration that naturally comes with learning and mastering a new skill.
Mhm.
And especially like at the level, like whether it's like you're going towards high school or college or elite or international, or, you're going from high school to undergrad to graduate school, all those things, you're mastering a skill that requires a great deal of refinement. And
Mhm.
so there's going to be frustration. It's not going to be a one and done. And so I just try to be really intentional about helping the clients that I work with to see discomfort as part of a growth, not as a
Yeah.
sign of something's wrong. Now, obviously, if they have an injury, that's different. But
Mhm.
trying to just shift that mindset that um, one of the most rewarding things is going to be after you've had that discomfort and you've grown not only as an athlete but as a person, and your mental stamina is improved.
Mhm.
And so I think that's a hard conflicting message sometimes that we get, particularly as parents, in the sense of like there's all this pressure to make your child happy and comfortable, but at the same time then you're missing those chances for them to
Mhm.
experience the frustration and master something new. We also just have no delay of gratification. You want
Yeah.
something, it's like immediate. And so there isn't this whole
Mhm.
thing like I worked hard and now I got to wait for 3 weeks to order it and for it to come. It's
Mhm.
going to be there tomorrow.
Literally 4 AM. It's
Hmm.
so that's so real, and this idea of taking into this taking into consideration this idea that growth, like, there's gonna be frustration, there's going to be discomfort, and I'm curious your thoughts, like, in so much of the work that I do when I'm working with athletes, teams, coaches is, like, this sense of safety internally, like, they've
Hmm.
gotta have this sense of safety internally, so how do we help our kids stay in touch with safety versus comfort, like, the brain, right, of that amygdala not sending alarms that, like, we're in danger here, but that this is actually like, it may feel uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous, right? So sourcing that sense of safety, how can we as parents support our kids in that so they can then have the bandwidth and capacity to lean into the discomfort? So, like, what does it look like when we're around them? Like, how do we help them do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of like when you're dealing, and I know we talk a lot about this, but with anxiety. And when I
Mm,
try to explain to kids, like sometimes what happens is you have a fire alarm at
mm,
school, and everyone knows there's not a real fire. It's a fire alarm. You're practicing what to do. Where it goes astray is when all of our fire alarms feel like five alarm fires.
mhm.
And so I think a lot of that is really helping them know that difference between what is an alarm saying like, "Ooh, this
Yeah.
is hard," versus like what is a, "Oh, I need to go get I need help."
Yeah.
And I think it's really tricky. I mean, it isn't easy because obviously we wouldn't kind of be where we are. And I think it's difficult even for coaches. And again, they are trying to balance the athlete's needs, the parents, and the team,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's a lot. And so for them, I can see right now how it would be really tough because people are going to want their child to be happy.
Right.
Happiness comes with success, but to get to success, it's not always comfortable.
Right.
And so I think one of the things really explaining is like, this is going to be hard and your child's going to get pushed.
Mhm.
And that's okay. That's where we are. And one of the things I think that's been really valuable is when the coaches talk about like even where they are in the training cycles, like
Mhm.
we're not going to wear a tech suit at this meet because we're not even in that kind of shit. Like, we're going
Right.
to do speedos because that's where we are in the training cycle. And this is how you should expect your performance. And I think some of that knowledge helps them understand that.
Totally.
So
The
communication is a
context.
big
Yep.
piece of it.
Yep. And then as a parent too, not so when our child is in, so I think when I hear you say discomfort, like, I'm intellectually, I'm like, I got this. Like, I'm trying to kind of connect back to where I was prior to knowing what I know now of like, okay, I've got that. Like, I know it's gonna, like, there's gonna be struggle. But then when you witness it, it like pops in ways you might not imagine.
Yes.
And then it may signal my 5 alarm fire when it's not
Yes.
even right. So then there's this kind of response. So that idea of, okay, how do we, yeah, navigate that that
Yeah.
space?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna and I think probably the person who describes it best, and I know we've talked about her a lot, is Dr. Becky, when she really talks about that when they're frustrated, praising the frustration.
Mm,
So, "Oh, you're frustrated. I can understand that. You're working really hard and here's what you're working towards." Like just a reframe. What
yes.
we tend to do naturally as parents is we see that frustration and we want to comfort. "Are you okay? I'm sorry. I knew they shouldn't have pushed you that hard.
Blame,
This."
totally. Hmm.
Mhm,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
it's hard when you have, like, a 16-year-old and you see them crying or upset. Your every maternal instinct is to be like,
Hmm.
"You're okay, what's happening? Tell
Yeah.
me more." And, I think what we need to do is recognize, like, they're working hard and praise the process of working hard and feeling frustrated, and keep, again, back to that, like, what is the end game? What's the goal
Yes,
here?
so powerful. And
Um,
this when do we, you're like a part of your background and work in the world too is assessments, and as a clinical psychologist, like this space of when do we tag someone in? Like when do we say, okay, so these if we're regulating or modulating ourselves, we're mirroring in the ways that we're wanting to, kind of we're doing our own work as parents. And there's kind of this frustration that we say is, I don't like the word
Mhm.
normal, but for putting
Yeah.
it in parentheses, appropriate matches the like an appropriate level of frustration. At what point or where like those pings go off, or like, huh, okay, maybe we're needing a little bit of extra support here to build some skills or resources.
Yeah, I always say look at the functioning. So how are they functioning, not just in their sport, like not just based on their times or their batting average
Hmm.
or whatever it is, but how are they doing at school? How are they doing socially? What are they doing in like their community or other extracurricular activities they might be
Hmm.
involved in? So if you're noticing like they're really struggling and grades are dropping, or you're noticing that they're really avoiding going out with friends. So always look at that functioning. That's your first red flag. So if you
Hmm.
notice those things are changing or there's been a real dip, that's when there's probably more going on than just feeling like this frustration. Because I never want to undermine how someone's feeling.
Right.
But if you notice there's been an impact in how they're functioning, that's when we usually say
Got
there's
it.
probably more going on here than just this learning cycle or mastery of a skill.
Oh, that's so powerful. I love that. One of my mentors a while back when we were teaching mental health first aid, she would say, if it impacts your ability to love, learn, laugh,
Yes.
and what's I want to live like just
Yep.
life, right? And you're in
Yep.
that way. And so
Yep.
that when the emotion then is impacting how they're engaging and showing up in the world. Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are
And then
things to support when so that makes sense. I heard that when our child's like in it, they're feeling frustrated and let's say we're unhooked, what are ways to show up in that space that can be really powerful?
I think the biggest one is avoiding all your natural tendencies to try to fix.
Fix.
Like so many want to go, well, let's
Slowly.
talk about your technique or let's do this. And I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing is just waiting for them to sort of ask because they'll share what they need and it's hard. And
Yeah.
so giving them space and time. And I'm totally guilty of being like, well, you just needed to do this and this and this, this and it would have been fine. And it's like, they know, they know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think the big thing is trying to avoid that natural inclination to just fix it,
Mhm.
being supportive, because you're going to love them whether they're the best, you know, doesn't matter. You're
Yeah.
still like, you want them to know that you can feel disappointed, but your unconditional positive regard is always going to be there.
That's so critical. That's where
Yeah.
Becky's two fists come in, and I bring that
Yep.
right into the athletic arena because I'm like,
Yes.
who you are, what you do, separate. That's so, so, so important of this idea of you are not what you do. And that love that's unconditional and steady. You can't earn more of it. You can't lose it. That's
Exactly.
so, so important. I think
Yep.
we need to say that more than we do. But then I also, what you just said earlier, is really sticking with me here because it's not just the words, it's how we're showing up. So I
Yeah.
think we could say that I love you unconditionally. And then if we were to watch ourselves or kind of look back at our behavior, are we showing up in the ways? Are we offering that loving presence even when right when we're when we so which means we have to unhook in
Yep.
order for us to truly be connected and grounded in that space. So yeah, parenting is no joke. Like
No, no.
it's
And
just right. Yeah.
no, and we know, like, we know conceptually, like, the things that need to be done, and
Mhm.
I wasn't, and so I think it's really tricky, and I can say, like, even at meets, my daughter was the one that pointed out, she's like, "Oh, mom, when there's a bad race, you, like, immediately look down and walk down the stands." I was like, "Oh, I didn't even I think it's me regulating myself, and
Right.
this is terrible, like, you shouldn't do that, like,
Right.
like,
Right.
it looks to him like, I don't accept you now, so I think
Yeah.
that really trying to separate those 2, and the big one is just take a beat and give them a second to kind of
Yeah.
process through, and as much as just like with everything, especially with teens,
Mm.
obviously we could save them from a lot of hardship if they would just listen,
Yeah.
but there's experiences they need to live and we need to
Yeah.
give them that room to do it, and so allowing them some space and really avoiding our instinct, which is to want, like, fix it really
Yeah.
quick and right away and write the coach this and do that, like.
Yeah. And reacting. It is that pause. That's like, I feel like one of the most important pieces of this conversation to take away is pausing.
Yeah.
Like, give yourself space and time, give your child that space and time, pause. And then from
Yes.
there, we're not in those default reactions. We're able to actually then decide how are we going to show up. And the
Yep.
other piece that's really landing for me is just like your behavior is aligning what you're saying with how you're actually showing up. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Not
I'm laughing
easy.
'cause it's so it is, it's not. And this is a funny related story. My oldest was at my twins played a hockey first summer hockey tournament for them at a high like a level that's a lot higher. They did a jump in levels like with the team that they tried out for. So they're now in a bottom, like right at the when it comes to performance, and they're the ones getting skipped over versus
Oh
anyways,
no.
so much learning. And it wasn't even so much that part, but my oldest was like, "How do you do this? Like, how do you
Oh,
launch
like she was feeling
without?"
stressed.
She's
Oh.
like, I can't control anything. I'm not playing." I'm like, "Welcome to my world." Like, this is what we experience when we're watching this
Yep.
like swell of, and so anyway, so she just decided to body check my husband because that would get her energy out. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I'll be doing that, but that idea of like humanizing, like that's
Yeah.
also what I hear. It's like just we're humans doing the best we can. And if we can get really clear about what that why is, like what
Hmm.
our why is, and zooming way out to see this human being and their growth and this vehicle that is sport, then we can begin to well, we can keep coming back to that. We can almost tether to that to
Yep.
keep us when we get when we get pulled in different directions to keep us back at center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
it's not easy. I mean, it's you're trying to parent the best you can. You feel like you have a lot of invested. You want to see them do well. But again, they want all those things too. And we're trying to teach them how to cope with disappointment. So we need to also
so we
nurture
learn how to
ourselves.
do it. So we're gonna have to come back. We're gonna wrap here, but
Yes.
we're gonna have to come
Yes.
back. I definitely want to touch on like sports specialization and just development
Hmm.
and also expectations. So we'll just put a teaser out there in terms of what's appropriate, what's not,
Yeah.
navigating, yeah, and navigating, what toolboxes look like and how to best support when if there is a difference in wiring and how do we help our kids in that way. So I'd love to have you back. I
Yes.
know where
This
to
has been
find
so
you.
fun.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so this is like just so many gifts inside of this. So thank you for sharing
Oh,
your
thanks for
wisdom
inviting
and
me.
time. Yeah. All right. Until next time.
All right. Thanks.